Welcome to another edition of Off Topic. My name is Randy Zellea, the host of Off Topic now for about the last 3 years here out in the swamps of New Jersey. Joining me now from 98.7 FM, former Cowboy, former Giant, former Raven. He's on every single day, Monday through Friday, 98.7 FM ESPN Radio. My good buddy Chris Canty. Chris, how you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Randy. As you can see, I'm repping all three teams. I got the Ravens shirt on. I got the Cowboys jersey behind me, and I got the Lombardi from 2011.
Yeah, I'm noticing that the shine from that Lombardi trophy right now, baby.
Yeah. I keep it nice and polished up just to remind the haters I got a ring.
Well, you've been on my show a couple different times before, and we've talked about a lot of different things, especially your foundation, which we'll hit on in a few minutes. Talk about for you in this atmosphere we're going on right now, the quarantine time, and the situation that we've been in. Talk about how difficult it has been for keeping the fans who listen to the show entertained and being able to do what you guys normally do, because you have a great rapport with Dave Rothenberg and oh my God, Rick DPJH. I'm sorry, I had a brain fart. You talk about how hard it has been to keep the shows as entertaining as you guys normally are when there's sports going on.
Well, it's actually not as hard as you might imagine. I mean, we're typically talking about sports, but we're usually breaking down games. I think now, based on where we're at, this current climate, we just have to kind of dig into more of our personal experiences and the things that we're going through. And we really sympathize with all the other sports fans out there, because at the end of it, we're sports fans. And so we're going through it just like everybody else is. We're craving live team sports to come back, and it seems like that's going to happen sooner rather than later, especially when it pertains to the NBA and the NHL. MLB, not so much. But, I mean, we feel good about where we're at. It finally feels like we've gotten to the other side of this pandemic, and we're going to be seeing live team sports sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel. Do you think that the NBA and the NHL are doing things the right way as far as coming back and sort of like a central location, having everybody there instead of just having empty arenas in that sense?
Well, I think because their regular seasons have pretty much been wrapped up, they have the opportunity to transition almost straight into the postseason. And so I think that when you start talking about the concerns around COVID-19, I think you can limit opportunities to transmit the virus amongst league personnel when you do that bubble format. And the players are going to sign up for it because it still represents a chance for them to compete for a championship. So I don't think you have to deal with, the pushback from the players' side on being confined for the next, 6 to 8 weeks while they're competing and trying to win a ring. So I think just by circumstance, by virtue of the calendar, the NHL and the NBA had an advantage as opposed to MLB in terms of formatting a return to play.
Can you give us the player perspective? You have been on that side when it came to as far as having to negotiate with unions and talking with the owner side and just the NFLPA and the owners. What was that like? And for being a representative of the players, can you talk about what your role was and how it was to have to be a voice for them?
Well, it's almost like you have to play peacemaker. With the NFLPA, you're talking about having 2,000 constituents thereabouts and trying to get everybody on the same page. You have so many different interests because guys are in different situations. A guy in his rookie year is not thinking about the same things that a guy in year 7 or 8 is thinking about. A guy that's on the precipice of free agency is not thinking about a guy that's close to retirement. So, there's so many different interests. You're trying to come up with the best plan that takes care of the most important things as it pertains to not only the current guys, but the future of the union. And it's tough. It's tough because, it's just by the nature of it, the owners, it's easier for them to be in alignment with what the needs of one another are, because you're talking about 32 owners, their interests are somewhat aligned. With players, that's not necessarily the case. So it's always tougher to get all the players on the same page than it is the owners on the same page. So that's why owners usually have an advantage when you're talking about these labor negotiations.
Yeah, but like you just said, as soon as you just gave that number, that was like, yeah, it's a couple, close to 2,000 people compared to 32. The 32 are probably going to win because they're usually all have the same goal. So, we one of the things I never really got a chance to talk to you about, you and I have had many conversations, but the transition from player to broadcaster, you were towards the end of your time with the Ravens, you had already started making that transition. You had been doing a lot of call and stuff while you were still in here at New York. When did you decide that was going to be the route that you wanted to go?
When the NFL decided that they were done with me. That's what it came down to. I mean, my last year in Baltimore ended on IR. I had a shoulder injury, and I was rehabbing off season, spring of 2016, and I got a call from one of the teams in the AFC, and they told me to hold tight. We'll see what happens. We'll see what develops. And when I didn't get a call back is when I realized that was probably not going to be playing in the NFL anymore. So I just decided that was the right time for me to make my transition and focus my attention on trying to get into the media. I didn't know where my end would be. I didn't know where I would start, but I'm thankful that 98.7 gave me an opportunity starting as a weekend host with Anita Marks, and then my career kind of evolved from that point.
Anita is awesome. And for a young lady, man, she certainly knows her football, and I think she might have
was gambling too.
Oh yeah, well, I think she might have forgotten more football than I'll ever know, and I hate to put it like that, but you have a championship with the Giants. Let's talk about your on field career for a little bit. Can you talk about that season and the term getting hot for that Giants team? Right towards the end of the season, you beat the Jets, beat the Cowboys in that final game of the year. What was that season, that end of that season going into that playoff run like? What can you talk about the atmosphere and what was like in that locker room?
Well, 2011 was such an interesting year because, as you remember, we had the lockout. So we didn't have the off-season strength and conditioning program. We didn't have OTAs. We didn't have mini camp. And there were questions as to where we were going to do our training camp. At that point, we were going up to Albany and spending 5 or 6 weeks up there for training camp before we came back down to Quest Diagnostics. So it was just so much stuff that was up in the air. But when we finally got approval to come back in the buildings and, they solidified plans for the preseason, I think everybody in that locker room recognized that we had the talent to make a run. If you remember, Randy, we started that season, I want to say we were 6-2, and the highlight of that was a win up in Foxborough.
Yep.
So we believed that we had the talent to compete at a championship level. It was just a matter of making sure that we were playing well at the right time. Now, after we started that way, we went through a little bit of a mid-season lull. We lost 4 straight games, and then all of a sudden you started hearing the grumblings about Tom Coughlin might be fired, and the Giants ownership is thinking about cleaning house. Everybody's on the hot seat. And then somehow, some way we were able to, kind of get into a position where we needed to win 2 games in order to get into the tournament. And at that point, it was a decision that we all collectively made on that team that we were going to go all in. And we said, we don't know how it's going to end. We don't know what the outcome will be, but we're just going to do as much as we can for as long as we can. And it ended up being enough to win a championship. So, I mean, the 2011 season and that Super Bowl team, that's the epitome of 53 guys being willing to sacrifice and commit to something greater than themselves. And the result was a championship.
I remember watching that Green Bay game, and I said to myself, if you guys are able to beat out Green Bay, you guys are going to be able to go, because it seemed like every loss that you guys had earlier in the year that year, you had a loss against San Francisco. You had a loss against Green Bay.
San Francisco was a close game.
Yeah, San Francisco was a close game. It was still a loss earlier in the year. So every game you had was a bounce back. So it was, you didn't play the Falcons earlier in the year, but man, you guys romped them. Like everyone thought that was going to be the game of the week, and that was you guys put a hurting on them. You guys put a real hurting on them.
Everybody except for us, we knew that wasn't going to be. That wasn't the game we were worried about. I got to tell you this, Randy, the only opponent in the playoff field that year that we were really worried about was the New Orleans Saints. And that's because we knew if we were to end up having to play them, we'd have to go down to the Superdome again, and they embarrassed us in primetime football in the regular season. I want to say it was a Monday night game, and that was during that 4-game losing skid that we had, and they just – I mean, it was a romp down there. And we just – that was an environment that we didn't feel confident that we could go into and win. But conversely, we felt confident about competing against Green Bay. It didn't matter where we played the game. We felt like we matched up well against them. And because the game was so closely contested out in Candlestick, we had – you know, we had a pretty good feeling about going out there and being able to pull off the win if we would end up in the NFC Championship game. So, I mean, once we beat Atlanta and Green Bay, I mean, we knew San Francisco was going to be a tough fight, but we were just happy to see San Francisco beat New Orleans the week before. That was a close game. And once we saw Alex Smith running down the sideline and setting up the game-winning score, I mean, we felt like we were in business.
Not only that, but after that game, you guys had to duct tape Eli back together because Eli took a beating that game.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. But he played out of his mind. I mean, that was one of the best performances that I had seen from a quarterback in my entire time watching the NFL, from a kid to now. I mean, that was a gutsy performance by Eli Manning. He just kept picking himself up off the turf. Didn't matter whether it was Ray McDonald or Justin Smith or Aldon Smith. They just they took turns taking shots at Eli Manning, and he just kept getting up. He kept showing up. But I think that resembles the kind of team that we had, because even when we got knocked down, we just found ways to get back up off the mat. And again, that was a gutsy team, and that run basically encapsulates what that team was all about.
Let's talk about Eli for a minute here. You know, obviously retiring this past year. Do you think he gets the credit he deserves for his mental toughness, being a New York quarterback, having to deal with the media, have to dealing with the ruling fans, and being able to have the success he had without an offensive line since that 2011 championship team? That offensive line has never really felt like it really was together to protect him. In your opinion, does he get the credit he deserves?
I don't think he does, because once he retired, you know, you had all these questions about, is he a Hall of Famer or isn't he? And it didn't make sense to me just off of the 2 runs that Eli made alone. You gotta give him the nod to be putting on a gold jacket and be enshrined in Canton. But, you know, Eli Manning, since he was drafted, has done nothing but represent the Giants organization with class on the field as well as off the field. And that's one of the things that people don't realize about being the quarterback of the New York Giants. You got to deal with the New York media and the New York fan base, and not every quarterback is built for that. So you got to give Eli Manning credit for being able to take all of the slings and arrows when the team underperforms. And the fact that he does that without pointing the finger at anyone else, I mean, that's when you got to give him a tip of the cap. I mean, Eli Manning is a special player, and it's not just his physical attributes, it's his mental makeup as well. So, yeah, I don't think he gets nearly the kind of credit that he deserves for his mental toughness.
What kind of leader was he in the locker room?
He was a lead by example guy. I mean, one of the things about those Giants championship teams was there was a bunch of blue collar guys, lunch pail, go to work, not trying to be flashy, not trying to stand out above the rest of your teammates. It's all about just trying to work and trying to win each day. You know, my position coach, Mike Waffle, used to always say, everybody wants to win on Sunday, but it's the guy that wants to win Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday that's going to have the best chance when we get out there in between the white lines. So I think that was the mentality of the Giants team. Jerry Reese and Tom Coughlin were intentional about bringing in guys that had that kind of mindset, guys that wanted to work hard. The Giants defensive line in 2011, we came into work every off day to get a lift in. Everybody's responsible for getting 3 lifts during the course of the week in the regular season. And for the defensive line, we wanted to prioritize getting a really good workout, so we did it on our off day together. And every single time we went into the weight room, guess who was there? Eli Manning. and so you just – that kind of guy showing that kind of consistency with his approach to preparation, you have no but to respect him in the locker room. So was establishing the standard that everybody was going to have to meet when they became a part of the Giants and when they came to work every day.
You know, it's funny, too. One of the things that I said about both of those championship teams that beat the New England Patriots, the key word for me, both on the offensive, defensive side of the ball, were depth. Something that I always felt that this Giants team has needed. The great signings and the drafting of some of these rookies that they've had is great, but this championship teams had depth in their offensive line and the defensive side of the ball. Do you think that's what this team needs now to start building on those particulars, the offensive line and more of the linebacker situation there? They really need to build that and build some depth to have guys. If A is out, B is coming in without missing a beat. That's been a problem for this team for the last few years. I wanted to get your take on that.
Well, it's been a problem for these teams the better part of this decade, and it hasn't showed up since the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, I think over the last 3 years, the Giants have the worst record in football, and the reason for that is the team hasn't been very strong in the trenches. The offensive line and the defensive line have left a lot to be desired. Now, to Dave Gettleman's credit, the last couple of drafts, he's tried to address it. I mean, you have Dexter Lawrence, you have B.J. Hill in there, you have Andrew Thomas, you have Will Hernandez. I mean, so you're starting to see, he's invested on that side of the ball. Even bringing Kevin Zeitler in from the Cleveland Browns was a fantastic get, that trade. So I just think that Dave Gettleman has been intentional about trying to build up the O-line and the D-line. He calls them the hog mollies. Those groups haven't played well in his tenure as the general manager, but I'm hoping that you start to see some return on that investment this upcoming season.
Let's look at the other side of MetLife Stadium, the New York Jets. I always feel like it's always
Randy,
something.
you look so frustrated. You look so frustrated.
You know what it is? Because I'm trying to find the right words because
you know what? I think that's interesting, Randy, because we were talking about the Giants having the worst record in football over the last 3 years, and yet you almost feel better about their trajectory than you do the Jets.
Yeah, because you know what it is? It's like on paper, and you're like, in the big scheme of things, you're like, okay, they should be better. They should just be better because the amount of talent that they have, with the quarterback that they have, a rising star quarterback, they should just be better. Obviously, with the mono early in the year for Darnold last year, not being able to play, but still, you're just like, even up for the years past, they could just never get it right. And I've always said, and you can disagree with me on this, I've always said that the management is a reflection to the product on the field, no matter what sport it is. If the top of the organization is committed, it goes all the way down to the last guy on the field. If the front office is a mess and the left foot doesn't know what the right foot's doing, it's going to reflect on the field. It reflects with the Mets. It reflects with, for a long time, the New Jersey Nets. It was always a mess. I always felt that the Jets, because of the way things were being run there at times, it was a reflection of the product on the field.
Yeah, when you have dysfunction at the top of the organization, it's going to trickle down. And that's the one thing that the Jets just haven't had. They haven't had any stability. And when you don't have the infrastructure in place, it makes it hard to get the best out of your people. It doesn't matter what business you're in. We're talking about a football team, but you could be talking about any corporation around America. Right. When you don't have the infrastructure in place, it makes it hard to get the best out of your people. It makes it hard to get your players and coaches to realize their full potential, and the Jets just have not had that. They've had too much turnover, too many coaching changes, too many changes in strategy and philosophy when it comes to the identity of the club. And so, I'm excited about Joe Douglas. I know him going back to the Baltimore Ravens organization. I know he grew up with them in the Philadelphia Eagles organization. So he's learned from two of the best in Howie Roseman and Ozzie Newsome. And so I think that they're on the right track with that. They gave him a 6-year contract. So we'll kind of have to take a wait and see approach. But I like what he's done in his first offseason on the job. Some of the moves, solidifying the offensive line, smart free agent moves, not overspending for anybody. But we'll see what happens with that. It's so tough to try to figure out where the Jets are going to go in 2020 just because you really don't know whether or not they have a quality head coach. I'm not a believer in Adam Gase, and I know he's had some issues with some of the personalities in his locker room. And, anytime that you have questions at the head coaching spot, it makes it a little tough to try to evaluate the team and project where they're going to go.
And not only that, but when your head coach is dictating more than what your general manager is doing, it's a tail in a handbasket. It's never gonna work. And I think that's what the problem was with the Jets last year, with all the moving around in the front office after free agency and after the draft. It's like you just said, it's hard to build stability. It's just,
well, the one thing I could never understand, and they brought Adam Gase in to be a quarterback whisperer and an offensive guru. They had the worst offense in the NFL. You paid all of this money for Le'Veon Bell. Now, I know that it was Mike McCagnon and not Joe Douglas, and Gase wasn't necessarily on board with the decision. But nevertheless, Le'Veon Bell is on the team. I don't understand why there were only 3 games where Le'Veon Bell had north of 21 carries. That part of what happened in 2019 will never make sense to me. So, again, I mean, you can have great schemes, but you got to first figure out a way to have good relationships with the guys in the locker room. If your head coach doesn't have that skill set, then it's going to be hard to be successful in today's game with today's athlete.
But that's exactly what you just said, though. You have to identify what your identity of the team is. If you have one of the best runners and the best running back in football, or one of them, wouldn't you want to focus on him? And one of the things,
Randy, look at it this way: who else do you want to get the ball to?
Exactly.
Who else is there for the game?
Exactly. Well, that's my thing too. It's like everyone can say what they want, but when Mark Sanchez was with Rex Ryan, though, they knew what Mark Sanchez was those first 2 years. He was a rookie quarterback, wasn't going to throw the ball much, so they focused on the running game, and he only threw when he had to. Then that third year, he's like, "Well, I'm going to expand my game out and start throwing the football," and he was doing things that wasn't successful the previous 2 years. Don't try and be something you're not. If you have your strength here, which is your running game, focus on your running game. It's like, why not? It doesn't make any sense to me. I'm sorry. I try to be logical sometimes, and sometimes you're trying to be logical in an illogical situation. It just doesn't work. So
it makes too much sense.
Yeah, it makes way too much sense. So it was one of the things I like about listening to you guys on ESPN Radio is you and DiPietro have such great chemistry with each other. Can you talk about, when you guys all got together? Because I know originally it was Alan Hahn, and then you two, and then you guys made the switch with Dave Rothenberg. Was there a comfort level that you guys had with Alan that wasn't there with David? Because it's 2 totally different personalities. What was that transition like with the change? And what was your initial thought about working with Rick, being a hockey guy, you being a football guy? What was that like?
Well, I mean, Rick is an athlete. I know it's a different sport, but he's an athlete, and he understands, the dynamics of a locker room. So anytime we just started doing the show, it just felt like I was back in the locker room talking sports with my teammates. And so that's what made that connection cool initially. And I think that's the kind of chemistry that we've been able to build on. As far as the switch from Alan to Dave, you're right, Randy. They're 2 different personalities. At the time, Alan wanted to take a step back for some other things, some other reasons. And so, we moved forward with Dave Rothenberg. And the one thing I'll say about Dave is that his sports knowledge, just his knowledge base about the history of all the sports and the history of all the local clubs is a tremendous value to our show. And his contribution in that regard is just amazing. The way that he's able to frame the conversation and set Rick and I up to make our best points, that's a skill set that you develop over time, just gaining the experience and being a radio host. So it's really cool because Dave makes the conversation really easy for Rick and I to have.
I met Dave once, and the voice did not match up with the face originally. When I thought he was going to be this muscular, tough guy, and it's like, all right, so this is the guy I heard the story about who was ripping his clothes off during the Super Bowl. Yeah. That didn't match up well.
Exactly. Dear God, I never want to imagine this guy ripping his clothes off.
You guys have, like I said, a great chemistry, and one of the things that I take very seriously about being on the air is, like you just said, is having the knowledge and being able to set up your partner in a way they're going to be successful. You being a football guy had to expand out more to baseball, basketball, and hockey, especially with Rick there. You can't get away without talking with not talking hockey. How difficult was it for you for preparation and knowing that it's not a night off when you get done with your show? You got to go home and sort of keep an eye on what's going on, being able to watch the Yankees and Mets, the Knicks and the Nets, the Devils, the Rangers, and the Islanders. having to keep an eye on everything. Was that a little bit of a change for you?
It was a little bit of a change, but DiPietro and Allen gave me some tips in terms of how I could kind of catch up and adjust. It's a learning curve, man, just because it's a completely new gig. You know, you might have a certain knowledge base just being in professional sports, but being able to talk about it in a way that the fans that are listening to you can understand is a whole different thing altogether. And so you have to learn that. And a part of that is understanding how you have to do your homework. And so those guys did a really good job of getting me up to speed, but I think they also did a really good job of challenging me and pushing me on the air to be better. And so I'm forever grateful to Alan and Rick for the opportunity to join them on the show. Got to also give a shout out to Bill Daughtry, because he's my mentor still to this day, and he taught me a lot too about preparation and understanding how to continue to keep a conversation going. That's the cool thing about radio. The conversation is never really over. You take a 21-hour break and you're back at it the next day, which is pretty cool. And so with the New York sports clubs, you get to have this continuing conversation, and you'll realize as the season evolves, you have themes around every single team. And so you use the recent events, the games that are played, to add a little bit of color to the themes that are going on. But, once you get into a groove with that sports season, I mean, it's not a whole lot that changes. You talk about the games, but you also talk about the themes that define those seasons. So it was tough at first. It was really hard, but I'm starting to get the hang of this thing now. I'm by no means perfect on air. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's a lot easier for me in year 4 than it was in my first couple of years.
What's the line that Vince McMahon always says? One of these times, Vince McMahon did 36 WrestleManias? He goes, one of these years we'll get it right.
One of them. One of these days, one of these shows, we'll get it right.
Yeah. What do you like to watch on your free time? You and I have always talked sports and charity stuff. We never really just talk about what you like to do on your spare time.
I like shows, man. I mean, I like to watch shows, whether they come on TV or Netflix. Some of my favorite shows, I like $1 Million Listings LA. One of the things that I did when I was playing, I used to moonlight in the real estate game. I used to flip houses in the Carolinas. And so that's something that I'm always interested in. What are some of the shows I watch on Netflix? Oh, I love Top Chef. Top Chef on Bravo is another one.
Really? I'm very surprised.
It is. Well, I love to eat, and my girlfriend so, I mean, it's the perfect combination. We get together, we sit down, break bread, and watch Top Chef. Like, that is appointment television for us. I like shows on Netflix. It just I'm all over the map. I like different series. I like different things.
You like HBO? You like HBO shows, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I was into Power. That ended recently, but I was into Power. That was one of my shows. Kenya Barrett had a show on Netflix called Black AF. You know what the AF stands for. We can't say it on the podcast. We're going to keep it PG-13. But I love that show. Just stuff like that. Like, that's kind of where my lane is. You know what I mean? So, yeah, when I'm not watching sports and nobody's watching sports right now, those are some of the things that I get into.
Did you ever watch Bar Rescue?
I did not watch Bar Rescue. That was one of my shows, man.
Oh, because I was about to say one of my boys was one of the chefs on that show. I should introduce you to him, and he's down in Philly, and I'd love to hook you two guys up and see if you guys want to just get together and cook, because he's.
I'm not the cook. No, see, Randy, don't mistake it. I'm not saying I'm the cook. I am absolutely not the cook. My girlfriend is the cook. I just love to eat.
Okay, that's fair.
I'm not the cook.
Listen, that's fair. I remember you guys.
Yeah, if I can give point to things and I say, baby, can you cook that? And if you can't, why don't we experiment and it? Like, for Memorial Day, we put this brisket on and we slow roasted the brisket all day. It was an 8-hour process, but it turned out fantastic. Now, me by myself, I wasn't going to put brisket on the grill, but because she loves to cook and she's never tried it, we dabbled into the brisket and it turned out pretty good. But again, like I said, I'm not the guy that loves to cook. I'm just the guy that loves to eat.
Yeah, I try to be the cook on the grill, and she does the cooking upstairs. And like, I tried pork chops, and I'm like, how were they? She's like, yeah, these could definitely go back on the grill for a few more minutes. I'm like, this is my first time. I get a free pass. I get to pass, baby. It's all good. It's all good. So NBA, with the NBA coming back, who do you think is? I chose the Clippers in the beginning of the year because of Kawhi, and
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Shame. What are you talking about? I still think they have. I don't bet against Doc Rivers and good strategy when you have guys on that team who can play like they can play. I know the Lakers are they finished off before we ended they finished hot, but I don't know. I just feel like maybe the Lakers they're not guard heavy. They don't have the guards to get to that. I just think the Clippers are more balanced out from what they have. Obviously, Kawhi is going to be able to play every single game now for the rest of the way. There's no load management between now and the Western Conference Finals. I don't know. My gut is telling me the Clippers over the Lakers.
Well, I mean, that's not crazy. I think the Clippers have the third best odds of any team, according to Vegas, to win the NBA title. It just so happens that my favorite team, the Los Angeles Lakers, have the best odds. Now, I won't argue with you. I think the Clippers have a much more balanced roster, but the Lakers have 2 top 7 players in the world. And, oh, by the way, the Lakers have LeBron James.
Yeah.
They might not have the guards, but they have LeBron James, who is the de facto point guard. So, I mean, I feel good. I feel good about where they're at. And the one thing that has come out of all of this is that LeBron James has been able to get some rest. And he typically doesn't have an opportunity to get this amount of rest going into a postseason. So, I feel good for a guy that's in year 17 having a 2-3 month hiatus before he's going to be back and competing. I mean, the tank should be full. LeBron James should be healthy. He should have the energy. I'm not worried about his conditioning because he takes care of himself. He's one of the best conditioned athletes on the planet. So for me, I think the hiatus is going to have less of an effect on the veteran-laden teams than they are on the teams with a lot of young guys playing key roles. And so I feel good about where the Lakers are at, and I think they're going to end up finishing the drill. And I got $5,000 on the line with Bart Scott. That's my LA Lakers are going to advance to the NBA Finals. So I really need to – if they don't win it, they got to get to the NBA Finals. So I'm going to need for them to knock out the team that you picked, the LA Clippers, at some point along the way so they can make that happen.
Okay, so I'm going to – because of our friendship, I'm going to root for the Lakers for you.
There you go.
Okay, so I'm going to do that for you.
There you go.
I'm looking at the Milwaukee Bucks still as a team. My only problem what I have is Kawhi and LeBron know how to win in the NBA. They've gone through it. They led teams to championships. I don't, because Giannis is still very inexperienced in that part of it, I'm not sure that this is going to be him as a leader yet. It took a lot of these guys close to 6-7 years in the league I'm talking about the great ones like LeBron, even Michael. Michael took 8 years to get his first championship. We watched that Last Dance and was like, oh my God, he was always great. It took him a while to get there. I think it's going to take Giannis some time to learn how to win a championship and be a leader. I think it's going to be one of the 2 LA teams. I can't see Milwaukee going to the finals. Yes. Winning a championship. No.
Well, I mean, if Milwaukee gets to the finals, that'll be a step in the right direction, right?
It's a step in the right direction. But one of the things, and I look at you're an athlete, you're a champion, so you know about what it takes to win a championship. It takes about sacrifice, and as far as being a leader, we watched that Last Dance when the Bulls fell to Detroit. That team the next day was back in the training room and they were ready to go. They were prepping. They wanted that next season to start. When Jordan
realized in that moment he had to get stronger in order to deal with the physicality of the Pistons and other big boys in the NBA. Yeah, I mean, you have to be able to set that tone as a leader. It's what we talked about with Eli Manning. And I have no doubt that Giannis will, he has the ability to do that, but you don't know what you don't know. And for a guy that's never been on that stage, you realize it's going to take some time and it's going to take some failure at that level in order to finally have a chance to get that breakthrough. And so for Milwaukee, I think it's important for them to take the next step as a team to have that experience in this year. And if they get to the NBA Finals, I'm not saying that they should count that as a win, but I think that's a season that they can feel good about building on going into 2020, 2021.
All right, Chris, before we leave, definitely want to talk about your foundation. How is everything going with it, especially during this tough time? I'm assuming that things got put on hold for a little while.
Yeah, everything got put on pause. We had to reschedule our golf outing, and so we have a tentative date yet, but we're not announcing anything because we don't know if the guidelines and the protocols will allow us to actually have it later on this summer. We also had to cancel our football camp. Randy, you know how much I look forward to that, being able to work with kids in the tri-state community, teach them the finer points about football, but use football as a vehicle to teach them about life. And so I'm a little bummed out that we can't do those things, but we have started planning for back to school. We're going to have the backpack giveaway for the kids at the PS43 Jonas Bronk Elementary School in the South Bronx. Joanna DeLucci and her staff, they do a great job over there, and we try to help them out as much as we possibly can. So we are kind of refocusing on getting ready for the back to school stuff. But I mean, the pandemic has thrown everything off, and we're like everybody else. We're trying to adjust. But the one thing I'll say is the Chris Canty Foundation will never waver in our commitment to being able to serve the kids in the tri-state area.
And you always have our full support. And there's anything we can do on this and from Back Sports page, we always support you 110%.
Appreciate that, my man.
Chris, thanks for giving me some time. Let's do some plugs. Where can people find you on social media?
People can find me on social at Chris Canty 99 on all three platforms, and by all three I mean Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. That's where I'm at. So get at me, shout me out, and look forward to hearing from everybody.
Chris, man, thanks for giving me some time today. I really appreciate it.
Randy, I appreciate you having me on.
All right, buddy. Look, we'll talk soon. Definitely.
All right. Stay safe.
You too. The great Chris Canty joining us here on Off Topic. I can't thank him enough for coming on. We'll be back tomorrow. We're going to be keep doing these podcasts. Enjoy it. I hope you guys are enjoying it. We'll announce who's tomorrow's guest in a little bit. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check us out, backsportspage.com/offtopic.